We've been married for 3 years in August.
5 years in August.
Oh, shoot. Don't. Take that out. Take that out. 3 years we've had our kids, 5 years. How long we've been parents? 5 years.
We have six kids.
6 children. So we'd actually met in the young single adult ward in Arizona State. There was magical fireworks and galore.
He said he thinks he was glowing.
And then we started hanging out and dating at the time, and then decided that it was time for us to get married about a year later. So
We first talked about kids probably right away. I was older when we started dating and got married than him. When we got married, I was 27 and he was 22. So I was like, if we want a big family, like we got to start right away. I was suffering from cysts and severe pelvic pain. I was in the hospital 8 or 9 times within the first year and a half we were married.
my biggest fear was possibly losing her. I think the hardest part was just, as like a priesthood holder, you always want to, let's give you a blessing. Maybe that'll help. And then sometimes you give the blessing and it's something that you feel is strong enough, and then a couple hours later after you give the blessing, then you're just wondering if the blessing was ever heard. And there's times where as a husband, 2 o'clock in the morning, you turn over and you just hearing your wife cry, and she would turn over to me and just apologize, just like, I'm sorry I can't give you children, and it's my fault that we can't have kids. How do you respond to that?
When we weren't getting pregnant and had started fertility treatments and still weren't getting pregnant, I went to my husband and said, why don't we adopt first? Maybe there's kids out here that need us more than ours do right now. So I said, well, let's just pray about it. So we prayed about it. We went to the temple, and a week after we got the answer that we would adopt, his brother called and said, hey, we have 3 kids that need a home desperately. Call your wife and talk to her. He called me and I said, okay, all right, like let's do it, and called his brother back to let him know, and his brother said, oh, sorry bro, there's actually 6. That right there is not a coincidence. The day that we got the answer that we needed to adopt, literally a week later, they called and said, we have these kids, and they're these kids. So we've been a family for 3.5 years. The official adoption date was in April 3rd of this year, and we had some court involvement with some kids, so official was July 10th of 2018.
I think knowing that there was a foster child, praying the same time. Yeah, same time. I think God knew that. I don't know if there's prayers that are ever interconnected with each other, or if that's how it works, but he knew that there was a child in Ogden who was praying the same time, the exact same time, the year of 2013, 2014, praying for a family that would give her the same love that we wanted to give a child. And to know that God was, his hand was in that all the way, was extremely humbling.
They came to me when we were down in Ogden, and they said, we have a potential family that is willing to take all 6 of you. And that's how I knew that Heavenly Father really was listening, and He really was answering our prayers. But here we are 3.5 years later, we're adopted. Sorry guys.
It was probably a couple months after we had taken them in. is when I was upstairs just getting ready. We were getting ready for church, actually. And I was just buttoning up my shirt and about to put on my tie. And I'd heard one of my kids yell, "Hey, Dad, can you help me?" And I just remember just zipping them. I was just like, I turned to my wife. I was like, "Did you just hear that?" And she said, "No." And I hurried, buttoned up my shirt, put my tie on, and I ran downstairs. And I was like, "Hey, what did you say?" He's like, "Oh, I said, hey, Dad, can you come help me?" I still can remember that day. And it was just so chaotic in the house. I was so mad because my kids weren't getting ready fast enough for us to get to church. But time stood still that day when I heard my name called Dad, and then Ash was being called Mom. And that was the day I told my wife, I was like, I could care less about anything else. I could care less about the years of football that I've played. I could care about the awesome things that I've done in my life. That day was the day I was like, I'm a dad, And he recognizes that, and I had that title. So
Trust in God's timing. That was my...
We did not like that saying.
That is not something I was very happy about, because I wanted it now and then, and but to definitely trust in God's timing, because we wanted children, we wanted to be a family, and at the time I was so mad that I wasn't getting it and not understanding why I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. But now I have 6. I have my big family.
You can't tell me that there isn't a God that provides that kind of, and is aware and had it all mapped out for us. So